the hardest part is to go from learning textbook versus real life. It's just interesting to see it from this perspective now versus when I was a student, because I absolutely went by the textbook. We all do. But then you start to learn, this is not emergent. It's interesting to see the differences between being in school and being in the field. But I always tell my students, like, I'd rather you be safe than sorry.
Before we really get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, can you kind of talk about some of the roles that you hold?
Yeah, so my full-time job currently, I work for Fox Rehab. I do geriatric home PT, Medicare Part B, in the home, which I've grown to really enjoy. I've been there about 2 years. Before that, I had various roles. I was at an outpatient clinic, and then I went to traditional home health, and then I actually went to another clinic where I started a Part B program for them in the home. And then I moved to Richmond, and now I'm in this field doing the geriatric PT. And then I also do just a little side gig where I do cash-based PT. I work out of a Pilates studio, which actually works out really nicely.
You mentioned you got a side gig for a cash PT.
Yeah, so it's not
Cash-based?
huge. It's something I do extremely part-time, like here and there.
Mm.
Um, I have a Pilates studio that I go through, and so I just kind of accept patients through that. It's really, really nice and refreshing because you have people that, um, you know, truly want to be there because they're paying a high price to be there. And, they go in there looking for your expertise the entire hour that you're in there. And it's very refreshing for that. And I know that most of my patients, want me there, but of course there's some that don't want to do exercise. Like of course that's going to happen. But most of your cash PT or cash based patients, they really want to be there. They really want to be educated. I love to educate, so I could sit there and talk to somebody all day long. And so it's been really refreshing and fun for me to really see a bunch of different, orthopedic stuff, because right now I'm seeing so much geriatrics where it's, balance, deconditioning, some ortho. But when I have my cash PT or cash based patients, I get to use my ortho skills a little bit more. So it's been nice to kind of have that balance.
And so, like, during the summer, we had an exercise prescription, and we were doing Pilates. I was like, I can do this. I couldn't do it. I could not. I was looking at the girls next to me just holding this position. I was like, how are you doing this?
Yeah,
Really
it's hard.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's hard. I'm not like certified. I haven't done a whole lot of Pilates, but it's definitely, I think, a really effective workout. And it's really interesting because some of it is just very, body weight based. And you're like, oh, that's easy. And then you do it and you're holding that position. And you're like, okay, I'm physically shaking right now. So like, I don't know, it's awesome. And I have kind of learned through that studio just different things. I took a couple Pilates classes with the owner of the studio, and she's amazing. And so I learned a lot just even through her, and it's been fun to kind of bounce back and forth between the two. I can see a patient and I can say, look, like, you're doing great with me, but I think it's time for you to go do Pilates with her because you're at that point where you're rehabbed, you're done. It's time for you to go just keep this strength. And so I think that like back and forth relationship has been really good and really nice. So yeah.
That's nice. Do you have like music playing, or how what's
Yeah.
the session like?
Um, I work so I work full time, so it's really hard to find time outside of that
Mm.
schedule. So I usually go in either really early and see a patient at like 8 a.m. or I'm after work hours, like 4:30, 5 o'clock. And so it's they have a treatment table there, so we don't have to, worry about that. But there's also like reformers and all the stuff that I have absolutely no idea how to use, so I don't touch it. But I know that there actually are therapists out there that do like PT Pilates, which is really cool, kind of combining the two. So I think that's a really unique way to combine two very effective things that can help get people back. So yeah, it's definitely it's very small right now. I mean, I would love to grow it. I don't really have the time to grow it right now. Obviously, I have my foot in couple different things, which I love. I love to be busy, but I would like to grow that at some point when I have the time. So yeah, it's been fun. It's interesting. I do geriatrics, I do ortho side gig, and then I do dogs. That's three different, very different settings. But for me, I get a little bit. I don't want to say bored, but I do get a little bit bored doing the same thing every day over and over again. So it's really nice to have something refreshing here and there, just to kind of keep it different and keep it new, and keep me wanting to learn more. I always want to learn more, but when you're seeing stuff that you don't necessarily see every single day, you're forcing yourself to learn more about that. So that's been kind of fun.
That's nice. Yeah, I'm kind of in that same ballpark. I want to uh, it's like a track reference. I don't want to run a 400 meter, a full lap, and then get to the end and be like, oh, I could have done a lot more effort than that. I want to be
Mhm.
like into the finish line, like, ah, ah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah, it's like satisfying to work really hard, like at the end of the day. Yeah, like I joke around, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a super busy day tomorrow. And then that day happens, and at the end of it, I'm like, wow, that felt good. Like I'm tired. I can actually just eat dinner and go to bed and not feel bad about it. So, yeah, I think being busy is a good thing. I think obviously having that work life balance is extremely important too. I'm huge on work life balance. I think that for me personally, I have to be really careful about not overworking myself and burning out. And I think burnout is a really high thing in our field sometimes. And so I think that's part of why I do different things, is to kind of
Mhm.
prevent that, keep it interesting, and keep me loving what I do. So,
Yeah, that's a good point. I was gonna also get more, just talk more about. Do you think having, let's see, having different eggs in different baskets kind of helps with that feeling of burnout?
yes,
Mm,
absolutely. Um, for me, right? So
mm,
some people don't like it. Definitely depends on the person. I know some people that have said to me, like, how are you doing all that? And why are you doing all that? And that's fair. Like, you get to do whatever makes you happy. Um, I'm a firm believer in life is short. And so I'm going to try and do things that I want to do and not be scared to do it. A lot of times, like these opportunities that I'm given, they're not really that high risk, right? So why not try it? Why not put myself out there? And I think that definitely helps prevent burnout. And I think just knowing your worth as a clinician, we went to school for a long time, and we're obviously very, bright people. And, we bring a lot to the table and help people every day. So just kind of like knowing your worth, and knowing what you do for a living, that it's really impactful. I think that's huge. And so I think when I get tired or I get burned out or I start to feel like I'm typing 24/7, I
mhm.
sit there and I think about, okay, that one patient last Wednesday that looked at me and said, "You're the first person to help me pretty much in the last, however many years." Like that absolutely trumps the 10 other patients that, didn't go that successfully. And so I think holding on to those really successful and just like warm hearted, like just make you feel good kind of situations, that helps prevent burnout too. So,
Yeah, that's a good point. That reminded me of you're having a, let's go like middle school. You're having a bad day in school, and then you go get lunch at the cafeteria, and the lunch lady's like, "Oh, how you doing, baby?" I was like, "Oh, I'm doing good, Miss Johnson." Next whole day. So you're that one
yep,
patient that comes in like, "Oh, how you doing? Oh, you look good
exactly.
today." Yeah.
Yeah, I think about it all the time. I'm like, I'm coming into these people's houses, and I'm likely the only person they're seeing at all
Mhm,
that day,
mhm.
and multiple days for that matter. So I try to walk into every house like a ray of sunshine, not annoyingly, but just be there for them. Before I leave, I say, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And sometimes I bite my tongue on that one, because then they're like, "Hey, can you sweep the floor?" Which is fine, but if I can just do one thing for somebody each day that they don't think is going to be done for them, I think that's just making a huge impact on the community. And I try really hard to do that. Obviously, work, productivity, being on time, all of those things play into that. So trying to balance the I'm going to help you versus I'm going to spend all my time helping you is definitely a delicate balance. So
Nice. Yeah. So
yeah,
going into that home health situation, so you work at full time at Fox Rehab.
yep,
Okay.
yep.
Um, just cool. Another animal. Yeah. So talk about typical work day for you? So you're, yeah, you can talk about that, and then the difference between like home health and just general outpatient.
Yeah. So Fox is really unique in that we do Part B in the home. So it's a little bit different than traditional home health. We don't have to do an OASIS, and the patient isn't considered homebound. So that's a really nice,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's a really nice service that we can provide to the geriatric community. I can't tell you how many people I've come to their home and they've said, this is so nice because there's no way I could have gotten to an outpatient clinic. And so there's that gap, I think, in healthcare where, yeah, they could need outpatient therapy in the clinic, but me coming to their home is, number one, far easier for them. And number two, sometimes far more effective because, for example, today, I had someone that can barely stand up out of their
Mhm.
chair, and I was able to help her learn how to get in and out of her own bed. I was able to help her get on and off her own toilet. Things that she's doing every single day. Where yes, you could absolutely simulate that in the clinic, and I've been in the clinic, and I know it's obviously wonderful, but I think just being in the home and having that direct impact on their functional status is amazing. I think obviously there's been times where I have told people, okay, it's time for you to go to an outpatient clinic. You need the machines that are there. You need the extra stuff that I can't necessarily give you in the home. And I think that, touching on that real quick, um, home care in general, whether it's home health or outpatient in the home, getting creative. Like I'm not the most creative person in the whole world, but I've had to tap into some creativity because, you go in there, I have a ball, ankle weights, TheraBands, and a stretch strap. And that's all I take into a patient's house every day for the most part. And so, you're getting creative with just a little bit of equipment that you have and getting people outside. I had someone the other day tell me, I haven't been outside in, I don't know, what was it, like 3 weeks or something crazy. And it's like, oh my gosh, you're seeing the sun, you're getting vitamin D. It's a really good thing for this community. Now, traditional home health is different because it's similar in the sense like the population is similar, I'd say. Home health may be a touch on the more medically complex side, but also I've seen a lot of medically complex patients with Fox, so I think it just kind of depends on the situation. Um, I would say there's been times where I actually recommend traditional home health because we only offer PTOT speech. Obviously, we can't offer nursing. And so, if someone has maybe a wound, I'm not a wound care specialist. Yes, we were taught it in school, but I think it's, for me, more appropriate for a skilled nurse to address that. So, I usually will, sometimes recommend home health, or even if somebody is having, like, I don't know. There's so many different things, if their vitals are, but I manage vitals all the time. So I guess it just depends on the patient and what they need. Um, and I think going into Fox, I had that traditional home health experience. So it helped me carry into this. The nice thing about Fox is I'm in charge of my own schedule. So I
Oh,
make my entire schedule, which has its pros and cons, obviously. That can get sometimes a little bit stressful, but what job doesn't have stress? So it's definitely nice to be able to say, okay, maybe on Thursday I want to end at 2 o'clock. And then I just make one of my days longer.
mhm.
So having that flexibility for me, for my work-life balance, is extremely nice. I typically work 9 to 5, but sometimes I'll work a little longer, a little less. And it's interesting because you're one-on-one, so you're not in the clinic seeing 12 to 17 patients in a day. I love the one-on-one aspect, and that's for some people, and it's not for some people. So it just kind of depends on what someone wants out of a career. But I've found a lot of job satisfaction in it. So
Nice.
that
Yeah,
was
like,
a long-winded answer to your question, but
no,
there you
it's
go.
great. It's great. I'm never like a yes no person. I'm always like, well, I mean, you could look at it two or three different ways, and then I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
what's the question again? That's a good point. So you mentioned the one-on-one care and the home setting. Uh, at what stage in your professional career were you doing that for Fox? Because I know from my experience with my classmates, like entry level going into the field, it's encouraged that we kind of get more like mentorship and leadership opportunities for like education, get more experience under our belt before we're really on our own. So like, what stage in your career where you're like, did you feel confident that you're like, oh, I can just go into somebody's home and do a whole plan of care, fully autonomous?
Yeah, that's a super good question. When I transitioned from, so I think it was year 2 out of school, 2 or 3 out of school, I transitioned to traditional home health, and I was in the Outer Banks, North Carolina. So definitely, yeah, it was
Nice.
fun when I was there. But I'm not gonna lie to you, that was probably the hardest transition in my whole career. That was probably the hardest transition ever that I've
Mm,
had to go through, because I went from having such an ortho mindset to all of a sudden having a very medical mindset. So
yeah.
you're walking in and you're having to make a decision regarding. I take vitals. I probably take vitals right now 15 times a day. I'm not exaggerating. Like you learn to be very comfortable with figuring out what vitals are safe. Sometimes I have someone that's a little bit high, but I know them well enough to know that I can maybe do a little more, or somebody I could do a little less.
Mm,
So, transitioning into that in traditional home health was very, very overwhelming. And it was hard. It took me a while to get comfortable in that job. It probably took me a good 4 months, 4 months probably to be really comfortable at what I do. And I think that set me up really nicely to work for Fox. And the nice thing about Fox, so we actually, I believe Fox hires a lot of new grads, and I think it's because of their mentorship program. I'm a sponsor, like I'm also a CI. I actually just had a student work with me for a while. So having that mentorship given to you, um, it's you can go to that person for literally anything.
mm,
And so I think it is a little bit scary for some people to go into somebody's house like that's I've heard that feedback from my students. A third year student, they tell me it's a little bit nerve wracking to go into somebody's house, and try to figure out what's going on when all you have on a script says deconditioning. So it can be overwhelming, but I think once you get comfortable in this field, it's fun because it's always a new environment,
mm.
um, and I think I'm pretty much 100% comfortable right now. Which it took me a while to get there. I will say there's times where I mean probably every other day I'm messaging someone on my team saying, "Hey, blood pressure is this. What do you think?" And how many times have I made that call? So you still second guess yourself sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's if it's keeping the patient safe. Um, the difference I think between being in the clinic versus being in the home is making the call of whether something is emergent or not.
Mm.
So I don't have a nurse to look to. I don't have a fellow PT to look to. Um, it's me. So I can't tell you, I've called 911 multiple times on someone. And I've caught things that, somebody may not have caught. For example, I called 911 on somebody because I had this feeling that she was an AFib and she was not able to get to the ER by herself. And come to find out she was an AFib. And then come to find out there were other things that were going on. And it's a really cool thing to be able to catch something and make that call and get them the help that they need. Whereas if they were home alone, they may not have gotten that help.
Mm.
Um, so that's where also I find a lot of satisfaction in it. Is that something I do all the time? No. But it does happen. And you just kind of learn to get comfortable with making those decisions. So,
Man, yeah, that's really encouraging because um, having that like familiarity with like certain ranges of lab values and vital signs. I'm going through that right now, studying for the comps is coming up. Oh, Friday actually. So like we
oh my
see,
gosh.
oh yeah, oh yeah. So we have like the yellow flag and a red flag, and so
Mm-hmm.
I could imagine just going into one on one with like an 80-year-old person, and they're like their O2 was like 81. I was like, well, 80. No, it's like 87. I was like, oh, it's not 88. It's 87. Like, 911. And then they're like, oh, what'd you call 911? I mean, yeah. So it's like certain, just like the book versus like the clinic. So yeah, kind
Absolutely.
of seeing that.
That is a conversation I have. Like, I've been a CI a few times, and I've had third year students both times. And that's kind of the biggest thing I think that is hard. It was hard for me. I'm not just saying that about the students I've had by any means, but I think it is the hardest part is to go from learning textbook versus real life. So like you just said, 87%, I would probably like, yes, I'm questioning that, but if they're not, dizzy or lightheaded, then I'm probably not going to make a huge deal about it. I teach them breathing techniques, get them back up to 90, and then, see it and monitor it in the future. But that's just an example, but it's just interesting to see it from this perspective now versus when I was a student, because I absolutely went by the textbook. We all do. But then you start to learn, this is not emergent. Okay, I'll give you an example. I saw somebody, their sugar was 375, and textbook would say call 911. And I called, the PCP, and they said that's somewhat normal for her. And so, it's interesting to see the differences between being in school and being in the field. But I always tell my students, like, I'd rather you be safe than sorry. So, obviously make a good clinical decision, but, trying to keep in mind that not everyone wants to go to the ER just because they have like a little bit of high blood pressure or a little bit of low blood pressure. So just kind of, talking through that. But
Nice. Do you ever find yourself in situations where you're in a home visit and then you see like a little guy walking around like, oh hey, and then he turned into like a group therapy, like a dog?
it's actually really funny you say that. Today, I went into an evaluation in someone's house, and the dog greeted me, and the son looked at me and goes, "Oh, here's your patient for the day." And I was like, "It's see that because I was like, if y'all want to work together, we can do it." Yeah, it was cute. And so, yeah, I love when I walk into a house and I see a dog. Actually, sometimes I called someone today and she was like, call me before you come in because my dog will bite you. I'm like, okay, great. Yeah, let's put that dog away. But yeah, I've definitely been in situations where a dog's cornered me before. You have to obviously be careful about that. I usually tell people to put their pets up if they think something's going to happen.
Mm.
Because there is a lot of liability in that, in a sense, being careful about, walking into someone else's house. I've seen a wide variety of, how should I say this? Like, home environments. So you have some that are cleaner than others. You have some that are more cluttered or less cluttered than others. And if you think about trying to do a PT session in a house that has barely any walk space, you have to get real creative. There's been times where I have had to call adult protective services. You're that connection for the person that needs the help that doesn't necessarily have that connection to get the help. And so there's a lot of the social side of it too. There's a gap in our healthcare in a way, and so kind of filling that gap has been really rewarding for me.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds fulfilling as well.
Mm-hmm. It is, absolutely. Mm-hmm. It is. Do
That's
you know
good.
what field you want to go into?
Right now, I like with my athletic background, I want to apply athletic concepts to general population. So in terms of like high
Mm-hmm.
performance, it looks objective just because I like at the highest level, but it's very subjective. Like for somebody getting out of bed, like you mentioned, that's high performance. So I want to be able to apply the principles that I've learned, that I've acquired through my experience, and just help that to teach and educate this general population because is everything is high performance to somebody. So whatever it is, I want them to be able to do that, live more functionally, and age in place. So I like the older populations because it's aging in place, aging how they want to age, and the older population, that number, the proportion of people who are older adults it's going to balloon. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think applying there's so many different approaches to obviously PT. One way, something I would do with a patient, another therapist could do completely different. And I think that that's a really cool thing about our field in general. So I think having that, drive for you to be able to say, I want to do this, I think that's awesome. And I tell everyone I'm the type of person that pivots one year and does something different. I think it's awesome to know what you want to do, but for those that don't necessarily know what you want to do, I think it's really great to explore, options and don't feel like you have to be, set on one thing, I guess, because obviously I have not been. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing, I'm not sure, but here we are. But
Rachel, what is one thing that you would hope that we all took away from this episode?
I think not being afraid to try something new and make a change. That's really scary for a lot of people. And I think at the end of the day, just remembering that life is short, number one. It sounds cliche, but it's true. Life is short. And so don't keep doing something you're not happy in.
Mm.
And reach out and, try new things. And just because you try it and you don't like it doesn't mean it's a failure. It's actually success because you tried something new and you decided, oh, I don't like that. And so I think along with that is knowing your worth and knowing your value and, trying to give your best at everything you do. So.